"This is where my parents live," Mark suddenly declared upon his visit. Behind him, his in-laws nodded happily. I was in the middle of an online meeting and quickly apologized to the other party before ending the call. I had even told them about a meeting at 1 p.m. Irritated, I turned my gaze towards the door. "Why did you come all of a sudden?" I asked them, maintaining my composure. My father-in-law proudly replied, "We'll pay off the mortgage, so please leave." It was hard to suppress a laugh at his statement. My mother-in-law had never worked, and my father-in-law was just staying at home without any employment. Yet, Mark was completely in favor of his parents' opinion. Disappointed by his stance, I considered divorce. "Then, I'll leave," I quickly replied, to the surprise of all three of them. "The mortgage of the house is $5,000 per month." With an inward smile, I began to pack seriously. Luckily, I had a business trip scheduled for a week starting from the next day. With my suitcase and bankbook ready, I headed to the entrance. "Goodbye then," I said that as I left the house. First, I'd start by transferring the house's title to Mark. I felt excited thinking about my future plans. "My name is Shelley Owen. I am 47 years old and work as a web designer. I went independent 5 years ago and have been fortunate enough to receive many projects. As a result, I've earned more than 5 times my previous salary and now live on the top floor of a high-rise condo. I met Mark, my husband, 3 years ago through Ashley, my former boss. He is Ashley's cousin. He's kind and honest but had trouble maintaining relationships, so he had been single for a long time. Around that time, my business was doing well, and I bought the top floor of a high-rise condo, doubling as an office. I wasn't planning on marrying, but Ashley strongly suggested I meet Mark. When I met him, he was very gentle and attractive, looking much younger than his actual age. He listened to me talk about my job and complimented me a lot, which drew me to him quickly. We started dating and got engaged within 6 months. My parents had already passed away, and my only relative was my brother. So, my brother and his wife also attended the family meeting. From Mark's side, his parents and cousin Ashley came. The meeting went smoothly overall. However, my sister-in-law's comment, "This seems tough," left me puzzled. I never imagined her words would become reality. After marrying, Mark moved into my house, and we started our life together. His workplace was harsh, requiring him to leave early in the morning and return home past midnight. Despite this, his salary was only a quarter of mine. I suggested to Mark, who was exhausted and went to sleep immediately every day, "It's bad for your health. Why don't you look for another job?" However, he reprimanded me with a face full of anger. "Are you saying I should quit my job? Are you looking down on me because I earn less?" I was surprised by Mark's strong reaction, as we had never argued before. Feeling uncomfortable about unintentionally disrespecting his job, I decided to apologize sincerely. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way. I'm just worried about your health." My apologies, too. I overreacted. "You've always taken care of the house, and I shouldn't have scolded you." With Mark quickly calming down and apologizing, our first argument ended swiftly. However, it became difficult to suggest a job change afterward. Mark's return time got even later, and he eventually spent half the week at the office. While I was concerned about his health, he seemed to enjoy his job. So, I decided to support him as much as I could, creating a relaxing environment whenever he returned home. "Hey, about my dad's medical expenses, could we increase the remittance a bit?" Mark suggested this when his father was in the hospital with back pain. Sighing inwardly at his request in his father's hospital room, I didn't hesitate to help my in-laws, as I had no parents of my own. Our household depended on my income, with Mark contributing a part of his salary to his parents. His salary wasn't low for a man in his 40s, but the exact amount he kept for himself was unclear. However, it was evident he was providing enough for his parents not to struggle. I couldn't agree when he insisted on increasing the remittance because it was in the first place possible only due to my income. Yet, it was hard to refuse in front of his parents. "Mark, you're really kind. Thank you so much. It's a big help, they said, looking at me and Mark. Under their pressure, I reluctantly agreed to increase the remittance. Afterward, my in-laws started demanding money for various reasons, not just the remittance. I wanted to refuse, but they knew I would say no, so they approached Mark instead. Especially weak to his mother's requests, Mark often decided to increase the remittance whenever she asked. And on the day his father returned from the hospital, after sending my in-laws off in a taxi, Mark and I returned home only to find, surprisingly, that his parents, who were supposed to have gone home, were waiting outside our house. It's tough for Dad to climb our stairs, so I thought we'd take care of him here until his back is fully healed. What? You can't just spring that on me. My surprised reaction made my mother-in-law frown. My father-in-law stood in front of the door as if to say, "Let us in quickly." "Mark, that's okay, right?" "Of course. Don't worry," Mark replied, and I stared at him in shock. He avoided my gaze. From his reaction, I realized that Mark and his parents had already discussed this. "Fine. You can stay here until you're fully recovered." I said that reluctantly and invited my in-laws inside. They looked around the house and sat on the living room sofa. Look, they live in such a nice house. Our house is 50 years old and falling apart, right, Dad? Yeah, it's really run down. Getting old is tough. My in-laws conversed, and Mark just nodded. It seemed they planned to stay here for a long time. To be honest, since I was sending them a substantial amount of money every time, living together might be less of a financial burden. However, that's not enough reason to accept living together. Renovating old houses is trendy these days. How about doing that, Mark? I suggested. Yeah, maybe. Mark replied vaguely. 2 years into our marriage, though it's supposedly still in the honeymoon phase. We hardly spend time together. We haven't even gone on a honeymoon, and this place was my home and office. It's fine when Mark is out for work, but my in-laws would be here all day. With them around, meetings in the living room become difficult. If we were to live together, I'd prefer moving into my in-laws' house and using this place solely as an office. Thanks to my initial resistance, the in-laws didn't bring up living together again. However, even months after my father-in-law's discharge from the hospital, my mother-in-law showed no intention of taking him back, only returning to their home to clean. Moreover, their belongings started overflowing from the guest room into the living room. "Mark, your dad seems perfectly healthy now. He even went bowling today. Maybe it's time for them to go home." "What are you saying? Sending my dad back with his bad back is cruel. What if it gets worse?" Mark raised his voice, and I fell silent. Seeing my reaction, Mark seemed to think that raising his voice would make me comply. He frequently insisted loudly on his opinions. Though I didn't always comply, opposing him led to my mother-in-law siding with Mark, putting me in a 3-to-1 disadvantage. This went on for 2 years. During this time, I took care of all the housework while my in-laws often went out to enjoy themselves. Despite his back being fully healed, my father-in-law showed no signs of returning home. "Sorry, I have a meeting at 1 p.m. today, so I'll eat lunch in my room." "Okay, but leave the dishes for later," my mother-in-law replied without looking up as I put lunch on the table. Mark had taken the day off and was planning to go out with my in-laws in the afternoon. He wouldn't take time off for our anniversary but would do so on his parents' requests. Thinking this, I responded, understood, and headed to my office. Right at 1 p.m., my online meeting started, but about 10 minutes in, footsteps approached, and the door burst open. "This is where me and my parents live," Mark declared, barging into the room with my in-laws nodding behind him. I hastily apologized to the meeting participants and ended the call. "I told you I had a meeting at 1 p.m., I complained internally while heading towards the door. "Why are you doing this all of a sudden?" I asked calmly, only for my father-in-law to smugly say, "We'll pay the mortgage, so you can leave." I struggled to suppress my laughter at his words. My mother-in-law had never worked, and my father-in-law stayed at home without working. Yet, Mark completely supported them. Deciding on divorce, I simply said, "All right, I'll leave," surprising all three of them. The house mortgage is $5,000 per month. Smiling inwardly, I started packing with a serious expression. Luckily, I had a week-long business trip starting the next day. With my prepared suitcase and bank book, I headed for the entrance. "Goodbye then," I said before leaving my home. The first thing to do was to transfer the house title to Mark. Feeling excited about the next steps, I checked into a hotel and immediately contacted a real estate agent to transfer the house to Mark, including the mortgage. The transfer depended on Mark's ability to pay the mortgage. If he couldn't, he'd have to make a lump sum payment or sell the house. I accepted this and asked the agent to find me a new home and office. My work could be done from anywhere with a computer, but I needed an office for calm discussions with clients. The agent found a suitable place about 40 minutes drive from my previous place. It was well equipped, with excellent security. I viewed it and decided to buy it immediately after returning from the trip. It was a luxurious apartment, almost like a villa. It felt a bit too luxurious, but I considered it a reward for my efforts and decided to buy it. I could move in within a week, so I stayed in temporary accommodation until then. After all the necessary documents were ready, I left the packing and moving process to a moving company. Mark apparently hadn't been informed about the mortgage transfer. During the move, my in-laws and Mark helped while speaking ill of me. When the movers finished, one commented, "You have a difficult family," making me blush with embarrassment. A week later, after settling into my new home, I received a call from Mark. "Shelly, what's this about changing the mortgage?" he asked anxiously, with his father shouting in the background, "Tell her to come back quickly." It seemed that Mark finally understood the situation about the mortgage. "But we're getting a divorce, right? It's unfair for me to pay the mortgage if you're the ones living there." "Divorce? I never mentioned anything about a divorce," Mark exclaimed. However, I couldn't agree with him if he intended to act like they never told me to leave the house. I pressed a play button on the nearby computer, and our conversation from that day started playing. "Why did you record this?" Mark was startled. "I was in a web meeting, so I recorded it for documentation," I explained. "I usually use an IC recorder for meetings and share the recorded audio after getting consent from the other party." I had mentioned this to Mark before, but he seemed to have forgotten. "Really? Is that true?" Mark sounded flustered over the phone. "So, good luck with the mortgage repayments. But first, you'll have to pass the credit check," I said. "How much is the mortgage anyway? Can I afford it on my salary?" Mark asked, which made me laugh. I had clearly informed him about the monthly mortgage amount when we got married, and I had shown him all the documents. But it seemed he never paid attention, thinking I would end up paying. "Let's see if you can. The mortgage is $5,000 a month." "What? Didn't you hear me? I'll say it again. The monthly mortgage amount is $5,000. Did you hear that?" Upon hearing the mortgage amount, Mark was speechless on the other end of the phone. I could hear his mother asking, "Mark, how much is it? $1,000? Maybe $2,000? Either way, it can't be that much." Mark was too shocked to answer her question. Then his mother took the phone, and I had a new conversation partner. "Where are you? The mortgage can't be that much." She sounded irritated and started to tell me how incompetent I was as a wife. She insisted that I should pay the mortgage because I had caused them trouble. After finishing her rant with a triumphant tone, she said, "Don't think you can come back for Mark's salary. We won't help you anymore." It seemed Mark hadn't told his parents about his actual salary. A son who sends us so much money every month can't be struggling financially. He'll keep taking care of us, so we have no worries. His mother confidently continued. I couldn't help but burst into laughter while listening to his mother boasting. My sudden laughter angered her. I decided to give her a dose of reality. $4,000. What? The mortgage? No, that's Mark's monthly salary. What? Really? She was shocked by my words and seemed frozen for a while, but then she started laughing. That's impossible. Mark has been sending us $4,000 every month. If his salary is really $4,000, he would have been sending us all of it. Stop lying. That's right, but I've been covering all his personal expenses and pocket money. That's how he could send the money. That's a lie, she yelled, not believing me. I calmly pointed her to the evidence. Look at the shelf right by the entrance of the living room. You'll find Mark's salary slips there. If you doubt it, check for yourself. Humph, you're just lying, she said and headed to the indicated shelf. I could hear Mark trying to stop her in the background. Soon, her voice of surprise came through the phone. What? There's not even $4,000 here. Mark, what's the meaning of this? Mark's actual salary turned out to be even lower than I knew. I could hear the in-laws questioning Mark in the background. You might not hear me, but just so you know, the house mortgage is $5,000 a month. Take care, I said as loudly as possible. Whether they heard me or not, I ended the call. Mark called again several times later, but I ignored them all. Let's discuss this through a lawyer from now on, I texted him and then ignored any further communication. The lawyer I hired dealt with frequent contacts in the following days, which soon quieted down. I promptly filed for compensation through my lawyer. After a while, a response came through my lawyer and I couldn't help but laugh at its contents. It seemed to be co-authored by a team of liars. Mark's side had hired lawyers too, but their claims were laughable. The allegations by Shelley are false, and the real victim is our client. We demand compensation for emotional distress. All I could say to my lawyer was, I'm sorry. The divorce was nearing, but our relationship as a couple was still ongoing. I wanted to get away from a husband who could make such demands. My client wants to meet and discuss in person. It seems Mark doesn't know about this, my lawyer said, handing me a letter. The letter briefly requested to verify the truth behind Mark's claims. I agreed through my lawyer and chose a location far from my current residence for precaution. At the scheduled meeting with the opposing lawyer, Mark didn't show up. The lawyer was young and polite, greeting me properly upon arrival. He revealed that his client was actually Mark's mother. According to him, Mark remained silent during their discussions, keeping his head down. His parents kept accusing me, claiming I fabricated fault to demand compensation. As I listened to this, the lawyer handed me a document. It detailed the malicious actions I allegedly committed. However, the lawyer felt that it was intentionally crafted to demean me. I explained each point in detail. The opposing lawyer nodded earnestly, showing understanding. My lawyer presented evidence in line with my explanations. I see, the content of your statements is completely different. You, Shelley, have solid evidence and a strong case, he commented. This part is reversed. Which part? After I pointed out and corrected a mistake, the opposing lawyer was visibly shocked. Once the explanation concluded, he left the room with the same politeness as when he arrived. My lawyer and I strategized to expose Mark and his parents' falsehoods. We also reached out to other relevant parties to set up a meeting to discuss compensation. About a month after the meeting with the opposing lawyer, Mark and his parents arrived, looking haggard. His mother glared at me as if seeing an enemy. You seem to be enjoying all this trouble. Who do you think is responsible for this situation? She seemed dissatisfied with the private dining room I had chosen. It was unfortunate that she didn't like the upscale restaurant she used to favor. However, her irritation might also be influenced by the fact that the opposing lawyer, having learned the truth, dropped their defense. Mother, you used to like this place, right? I thought you'd be pleased, I said deliberately, but she responded with an unhappy face. We entered the restaurant, greeted by the staff who were informed about the situation, and led to a private room. Mark didn't speak until we were seated in the room, then suddenly became emotional. Shelley, I was wrong. Please help me. I can't survive like this. I'll do anything you say from now on. Please come back. Mark's parents were stunned by this unexpected plea. I smiled kindly at Mark, and he seemed momentarily relieved. However, I signaled my lawyer, who then handed Mark a document. Reading it, Mark turned pale. What is this? What's wrong, Mark? Show me. While Mark struggled for words, his mother snatched the document, glaring at me furiously. The document contained Mark's claims, each refuted in red ink. "Shelley, how dare you underestimate us? Enough is enough." "Unfortunately, Mother, I'm only telling the truth." She gritted her teeth at my response. Suddenly, my face was splashed with water. "How dare you still act so arrogantly? Even as a daughter-in-law, we tolerated your infidelity, so you should be grateful and dedicated to your husband's family." To my shock, it was my father-in-law who had thrown the water. He glared at me, panting. Incredible to throw water during a meeting, especially with lawyers present. I burst into laughter at the absurdity. My laughter surprised everyone, including my lawyer. Still laughing, I responded to his anger. "Yes, it seems I wasn't the perfect wife. I had my earnings taken, was burdened with all household chores, and even though I said I didn't want children, I was berated for being infertile. I'm not strong enough to endure that." Still defiant. "You should understand by now. Once we're divorced, I'll have nothing to do with you. How about her as a new wife candidate? She's young, might be good for you." I signaled my lawyer, who, regaining composure, pulled out a photograph. It showed Mark entering a hotel with a young woman. "What is this?" I took it. Entering the room was my former boss and Mark's cousin, Ashley. Mark was shocked and speechless at the sight of Ashley. Ashley sat next to me and handed me a handkerchief. "Uncle, Aunt, I didn't introduce Mark to Shelley to make her unhappy. Ashley, this is a misunderstanding, you see." His mother began making excuses to Ashley in a sweet voice. Ashley's parents are Mark's uncle and aunt, and his parents can't be too assertive with them. Ashley had informed me that her parents were angry about this matter, so it's likely they will reprimand his parents. Seeing Mark and his parents quiet down, I submitted the divorce application and documents related to compensation. Mark seemed to want to say something but remained silent under Ashley's sharp gaze, promptly signing the documents. "By the way, this woman has a message for you. She wasn't aware that you were already married. She had already met with my parents and booked a wedding venue, calling this a fraud. She is demanding compensation, so be prepared." "What? That can't be true." Shocked by the decisive message, Mark began to cry in despair. Mark had been matching with young women on a dating site multiple times. The woman in the photo was one of them and apparently deeply loved him. This revelation shocked his parents, too. His father, surprised by the situation, was stunned. Actually, Ashley had investigated Mark's infidelity, explained the situation to the woman, and introduced her to a lawyer. I never met the woman directly, but I was pained by her apology over the phone. "Shelley, divorce seems inevitable with irreconcilable differences. But about the house, shouldn't the mortgage payments be considered?" His mother started, so I informed her that Mark was now the owner of the house and that it was being sold because he failed the credit assessment. "No way." His mother slumped in despair. We then left the restaurant. Within a month, Ashley informed me that Mark and his parents had moved from the high-rise condo to an apartment. Due to his parents' spending habits, Mark's salary alone couldn't sustain them, and they had even asked Ashley for rent assistance. The compensation for both the deceived woman on the dating site and myself was being covered by Ashley's parents, with Mark repaying them. Surprisingly, Ashley had started dating Mark's former lawyer. She was drawn to his decisiveness. "We never know what life will bring," she said, looking very happy. As for me, I started blogging about these events, which unexpectedly garnered attention, leading to new opportunities as a writer. Enjoying writing, I lead a busy yet fulfilling life. In fact, since the divorce, I've been strongly pursued by a corporate executive I knew through business, and recently our relationship turned romantic. He's trustworthy and has suggested we live together, but I'm still pondering my response. In truth, my mind is already made up. I just need the courage to convey my decision. Looking forward to our date tomorrow. Today, I'm again seated in front of my computer. This house, it's been transferred to our eldest son and his wife. Strangers should leave immediately. Despite the fact that I was bearing the burden of the house mortgage, I received shocking statements from my in-laws and husband. From the beginning, they had been using me with the intent to make me pay off the mortgage. When I learned this truth, my heart rapidly shifted from gratitude to anger. "Well then, I'll be moving out." To their mocking words, I responded with a defiant smile. "I will make them regret ever challenging me." Immediately, I sought help from an acquaintance and began plotting my revenge against them. My name is Michelle Anderson. I'm a 48-year-old lawyer working at a law firm. Currently, I'm living while taking care of my husband and his parents. It all started when I gave a house to my in-laws. I married James when I was 30. When our marriage was decided, my father-in-law was involved in an accident and injured his leg. He couldn't stand on his own and had to live in a wheelchair. My mother-in-law was also elderly and needed care, so I gave them a barrier-free house. Initially, we considered living in public housing, but then we decided to move them to a location midway between my husband's workplace and mine. This was my suggestion so we could reach them quickly in case of any emergency. I received a lot of help from the Anderson family regarding my father. "Please let me return the favor," I said. "My father passed away before I got married. Just before he died, he had accumulated a lot of debt, putting our family finances in a very tight spot. We struggled, piling up more debt to pay off the existing ones. My husband and his family were the ones who saved us from this difficult situation. James and his parents paid off my father's debts on our behalf. If you're hesitating to marry because of the debt, wouldn't it be solved if we paid it off?" "My parents think the same way," said James. "That's right. It's debt from a business failure, not from frivolous spending." "There's every reason to help," added my mother-in-law. "That's right. We should help each other out in tough times." "There's nothing to be ashamed of," said my father-in-law. Thus, they supported most of the debt without saying anything. Both my father and I expressed our gratitude through tears, and I desperately took the bar exam. The total amount borrowed from my husband's family was about $50,000. I was confident that I could repay the debt once I succeeded as a lawyer. I didn't want to carry the debt as a perpetual burden. My ultimate goal was to pass the bar exam and become a lawyer. With a firm vow to repay the money I borrowed from my in-laws, I continued to work hard to become a lawyer. With that strong determination, I immersed myself in studies and, as a result of tremendous effort, finally passed the bar exam. My father and in-laws celebrated my success, and my heart was filled with immense joy. To start my career in the legal field, I quickly found a job and began working at a law firm. The director was very kind, and I learned a lot from experienced senior lawyers, gradually honing my skills. Over time, I acquired exclusive clients and now hold an important position in the office as a female lawyer earning over $100,000 a year. Thanks to my professional success, I was able to completely repay the debt to my father and in-laws. However, after my mother passed away, my father soon left this world too, and I was left alone. That's when James proposed to me. "You're a strong woman who can stand on your own. But I want to be the man who supports you. I will always cherish you, so please consider marrying me." Convinced by his words, we decided to marry, expecting a happy life to begin. At that time, my father-in-law was unfortunately involved in an accident. Grateful for their past kindness, I offered to build a new barrier-free house for them, despite their objections. The gratitude I feel is more than words can express. Please, do not hesitate. I want you all to live comfortably. It was a sincere wish. I conveyed my earnest feelings, not just flattery. My enthusiasm reached them, and with a wry smile, my in-laws accepted my offer. However, right after agreeing, they added a condition. Michelle, why don't you live with us too? We heard you and your husband are looking for a new house. That's right. If you don't mind, let's live together. Eventually, this house will belong to you. James has an older brother. He, 3 years older than me, got married and left home a few years ago. He started his own business and, due to his business, left everything at home to James, as I heard from my mother-in-law. My brother-in-law had an oral agreement that in exchange for taking care of the aging parents, James could freely use the parents' assets. Before leaving home, my brother-in-law had communicated this to James. Moving to the new house would shorten my commute, and we would start living together with James and his parents. Since we could support each other in times of need, there was no reason to refuse living together. However, I was worried that I might trouble my in-laws. Having occasionally caused them trouble even before marriage, I was anxious about whether living together was appropriate. Sensing my concerns, James gently placed his hand on my shoulder and reassured me. Don't worry, Michelle. I'm here to support you. Let's live together with confidence. Encouraged by James' words, I agreed to live with my in-laws. I was expecting to start a new life with the four of us and have enjoyable days. However, the peaceful life I had hoped for was not the reality. Michelle, where did you put my morning clothes? Michelle, the TV remote isn't responding. Can you do something about it? Michelle, can you help me? I want to sit on the sofa. It has already been 13 years since we started living in this house. In this house, every family member always comes to me for favors. They have no intention of managing things on their own. The family is completely dependent on me for everything, especially my father-in-law, who is disabled. He doesn't hesitate to touch me freely. I told you I had prepared and hung up the morning clothes. Mother, that's the air conditioner remote, not the TV remote. It's on the desk. Father, please ask James for physical support when he's around. Please don't rely on me. I can't support you properly. I found myself replying to them daily. Initially, I suppressed my dissatisfaction and did my best to meet the family's demands. It was unthinkable that while shouldering the mortgage, all household responsibilities were also left to me. I had thought about divorce several times. However, James always skillfully managed the situation, and my in-laws would apologize. I wasn't feeling tortured or harassed, so every time they apologized, my heart wavered and I ended up choosing not to divorce. Day-to-day life was filled with the in-laws' dependence and minor frustrations. But somewhere, I felt a bond as a family, which might have made me tolerate the situation. Still, the option of divorce always flickered in my mind. My mother-in-law finally started showing signs of mild dementia, or perhaps she was just becoming forgetful. It's not clear, but such questions from her increased. James, who had promised to help before marriage, proved to be utterly unreliable in this situation. Continuing my life with these uncertainties, I gradually adapted to the environment through experience. I began to handle everything before being told and started to express my opinions clearly to James and others. However, my father-in-law's excessive behavior was something I could not overlook. I expressed my dissatisfaction not only to James but also to my mother-in-law. I can't overlook father's behavior. Lately, he pretends to have dementia to touch me. Mother, please do something. My father-in-law has not yet been diagnosed with dementia. To be precise, he was examined, but he wasn't clearly diagnosed with dementia. The symptoms were mild, so it was a gray area whether it's dementia or not, the doctor said. Don't say that. It's part of the illness. It can't be helped. Certainly, such behavior could occur in dementia tendencies. But normally, this happens at a more severe stage of the symptoms. Regarding my father-in-law's behavior, He was just using the word dementia as a shield to act freely. Even after the doctor said it's not dementia, my in-laws arbitrarily decided it's dementia and used it to excuse inconvenient situations. I could understand if it was really dementia, but using an illness to force others to endure is not acceptable. I consulted with James and sought a response from my in-laws. But each time, he said it was troublesome and kept postponing it. When I was about to reach my limit of patience, an unexpected event occurred. This month, the repayment is completed. I'll be freed from this suffering. On a holiday afternoon, I was organizing the household account book and my diary. Looking at the bank book, I noticed something and my face brightened. At the end of that month, the mortgage repayment for my in-laws' house would finally be completed. Filled with a sense of achievement, I felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Thinking that my burden would decrease and I would have more money to spend freely made me very happy. However, at that point, I didn't know yet that the real trial was about to begin. One evening, during a family dinner, James suddenly started talking about the mortgage being paid off. Michelle, the mortgage for this house is going to be paid off completely this month, right? He asked. Since he had never brought up the mortgage before, I was a bit taken aback by his sudden question. However, he poured beer into a glass from a bottle with a friendly smile. Yes, that's right, but why all of a sudden? I replied. Because we have to celebrate, right? You've had a hard time, Michelle. I want to celebrate grandly as a thank you, James said. I couldn't hide my surprise at his unexpected words. I was touched that James had thought that way and understood my burden. Thinking, if only he helped a little more with the housework, I felt grateful that he cared about me. His words instantly erased my frustrations, and a smile of joy spread across my face. James, thank you. Can I look forward to the celebration? I asked. Of course. We'll discuss it as a family and prepare. Just wait, Michelle, James replied. Relieved by his words, I looked forward to the celebration preparations. But this happy feeling didn't last long, and soon I was faced with the harsh reality. I accepted James's invitation without suspicion. It seemed that my in-laws had also heard about the talk and were preparing something together. A few weeks later, I was called in by James and my in-laws. Work had calmed down at that time, and I was in good spirits, so it was a perfect occasion for celebration. Sorry for the sudden call. I have something to talk about. It's okay, no problem at all. Today, we, as a family, have an important matter to discuss with you, Michelle. What's the matter? I thought it was about the celebration, but why make it sound so serious? Wishing they would just talk normally, I decided to listen to what they had to say. Actually, now that the mortgage repayment is ending, we want you to leave here, they said. What? I couldn't help but let out a surprised voice at this unexpected statement. They wanted me to leave the house as soon as the mortgage was paid off? What was I being told? Was it a misunderstanding? Such surprising words made me want to think it was a misunderstanding. I couldn't fully comprehend what James was saying and lost my words, unable to respond to his query. At that moment, I couldn't catch up with my thoughts and was just confused. Seeing me like that, my in-laws couldn't wait for me to understand the situation and began to explain further. We've sold this house to our eldest son and his wife, my father-in-law informed me. What? I exclaimed in shock. My mind was in turmoil, unable to comprehend what was happening. Being suddenly ordered to leave the house, and furthermore, that the house had been passed to James's eldest brother and his wife, was unbelievable. What was the meaning of all I had done for this family? Did this situation signify that my role was over? However, I could not accept such an unfair and unreasonable situation. Now that we have this wonderful house, your role here is no longer needed. We tolerated you until the mortgage was paid off, but now the house is ours. You are no longer needed," my mother-in-law continued. I had lived in this house with James's family, feeling deep gratitude towards them. Because I felt so grateful, I stayed without saying anything until today. But now, I realized it was all just an act. Even helping my father and me was part of their plan to make me do something for them. Facing this truth, I felt a deep sense of betrayal and disappointment. The sudden estrangement from a family I trusted was an immeasurable mental blow to me. The trust I had built up over the years crumbled in an instant. It was as if everything I had believed in for so long was just an illusion, deeply wounding my heart. They knew I was striving to become a lawyer to clear my father's debts, so they gambled, thinking the investment, though risky, could potentially double in return. It was a scheme to make me buy the house. We expected a significant return if we showed you kindness. Ever since you and James were dating, we thought the investment wouldn't be a waste, she added. When you were happy just for us taking a little care of your father and gave us expensive wine as a way to thank us. We thought you were easy, she continued. It was before my father's business collapsed. My family was quite wealthy until then. James seemed to have been eyeing my family's wealth from the beginning, knowing I was aspiring to be a lawyer. That's why he saw value in his actions up to this point. Unaware, I completely trusted James and his family. How foolish I was. I couldn't believe myself. That's why we devised this plan. We thought if we obligated your father, we might get a big reward, he said. Their confident and unbelievable statements were hard for me to accept. So, it's a great success. We've got a wonderful new house. It's in our name, and once the mortgage is paid off, everything is ours. What we do with our property is none of your business, they declared. Their words were filled with planning and conviction, and I struggled to accept this reality. It took me time to understand that everything had been planned from the beginning. For these 13 years, they had just been quietly waiting for this moment. They never truly loved me or my father. We were just a means to their end. Their plan had been to approach our family from the start, and we fell into their trap without realizing it. Faced with this unbelievable situation, darkness spread in my heart. My emotions sank into deep darkness, as if I was standing on the edge of a cliff. The word despair suited my feelings at that moment. I couldn't understand everything they had done, thought, and executed. So, outsiders should leave this house immediately. You have no place here anymore. Their words inflicted a deeper wound in my heart. Confronted with the fact that I was no longer needed in this house, I was just dumbfounded. This house was once a place of peace, love, and warmth for me, but now all that had crumbled away. A chapter of my life had ended, and a new, lonely journey was about to begin. There's your stuff to pack, so it can't be immediate, James. If you do that, you'll really be in trouble. Let's do it tomorrow. I'll give you until tomorrow to pack your things properly and leave, my mother-in-law declared. This house now belongs to the Anderson family, my father-in-law added. Also, I'll get the divorce settled. There's no point in us being a couple anymore, and I'm tired of your nagging. Make sure you've signed the papers by the time you leave this house tomorrow, James said. The words Anderson family weighed heavily on my heart. It was now clear that I had never been accepted by the Anderson family from the beginning. Was I treated unjustly and made to work like a slave, struggling to balance housework and my job because I wasn't considered family? All my questions merged into one, and I could only muster a bitter smile. I was deceived by your family from the start, I murmured. That's right. Are you stupid? Don't you understand that? James retorted. Hearing his words, I felt something breaking inside me. Looking down, I slowly raised my face and, forcing a smile, gave an unexpected response to my in-laws. Then, I will move out. My heart could no longer find a reason to stay with the Anderson family. All those days were filled with their deceit. My life from now on would be a new path. When I suddenly showed a bright face and decided to leave the house lightly, my in-laws could not hide their surprised expressions. Quite obedient, aren't you? Got something up your sleeve? My mother-in-law asked suspiciously. No plans. Hearing such an incomprehensible story, I felt like my life hit rock bottom. And just like that, my love for your family cooled instantly. I'll pack up my things right away and leave this place. I'll properly sign the divorce papers. I'll have my lawyer contact you later about the division of property. Goodbye, and thank you for everything up to now, I said. Without waiting for my in-law's reaction, I returned to my room. As I packed my belongings, I held back my tears while planning my next steps. After such terrible treatment, I couldn't just let it end silently. I wouldn't be at peace until they experienced the same pain, suffering, and unfairness I had endured. While packing, I calmly thought of ways to get back at them. I meticulously planned how to inflict the greatest pain on them. Various thoughts raced through my mind as I deeply contemplated my future actions. My anger and disappointment towards the in-laws were indescribable, but I maintained my composure, searching for the best way to resolve the situation. My revenge on them had to be more than just an emotional reaction. They needed to seriously understand the consequences of their actions. My new life began from there. While I was packing, suddenly my phone rang. The moment I saw the caller's name, a strategy formed in my mind. Surely this person will support me, I thought, and, without hesitation, answered the call, revealing the harsh situation I was facing. The caller listened attentively to my story, and then we discussed and promptly acted on a plan for the future. Once I finished packing, I quietly left the house I had lived in for years without a word to James and his family. When I left, I decided to sever all ties with them. So, I deleted their contacts from my phone. Determined not to respond to any communication from them, my decision soon started showing results. The day after I left the house, I received numerous intense calls from my in-laws. I had deleted the numbers, but remembered them due to our long association, which weighed heavily on my mind that morning. They must have realized that I had left the house and understood what had happened. However, I had no intention of responding to their calls anymore. As I looked at my phone, I indulged in a sense of superiority over my decision and smiled lightly. At that moment, the person who provided me a new place to live reassured me, "You don't have to answer the phone at all." I gratefully nodded at his words. I was ready to take the first step towards a new beginning. My life was about to enter a new chapter in a new environment. After the calls from my mother-in-law stopped, James started calling. His calls were like unbearable noise to me then. Unable to tolerate it any longer, I turned off my phone and, without turning it back on, proceeded with canceling the service. This action was a clear statement of ending my relationship with James. 3 months passed, and I had started a new life in a new apartment. Freed from the stress of living with my in-laws, I could focus more on my work. My daily life became more fulfilling, and I enjoyed my life to the fullest, free from past restraints. People around me noticed that I was shining. Post-divorce, my face became brighter with smiles, and my personality turned more cheerful and friendly. This change was recognized by others, and I received many compliments. Though previously oppressed mentally by my relationship with my in-laws, I decided to cherish my relationships with colleagues at work and build good connections. I plan to put more effort into my job and prioritize communication with my coworkers. When I made this resolution, the receptionist at my office appeared on the floor in a panicked state and urgently reported to me. "Miss Cohen, there's a parent and child at the reception looking for you," she said. Cohen was my maiden name, which I still use after the divorce. Hearing her report, I rushed to the reception to understand what was happening. The normally polite and composed receptionist's agitation indicated something unusual was going on. Something significant must have caused her distress. Seeing her worried expression, I wanted to be of support, and a male colleague, sensing her state, offered to accompany me. We headed together to the lobby. Arriving there, my expression changed dramatically when I saw who was there. I found her. "Mom, there's Michelle." When I heard that voice, I saw my mother-in-law and James. They were raising their voices inside the office, saying, "Michelle, how could you do this? Cutting off contact is terrible. Do you understand the trouble we're in?" I was stunned by their irrational behavior and couldn't help but question it. Others present couldn't hide their dismay at their actions. Their appearances, worn and filled with anger, were stark after not seeing them for months. Realizing the abnormal situation, other reception staff reported to the upper management, and soon the office manager appeared in the lobby. "Miss Cohen, a meeting room is prepared. How about having a discussion there with your in-laws?" "I'll contact him," the manager suggested calmly. Having already confided everything to the manager, I accepted the suggestion. Feeling uneasy about going alone, I took my colleague with me. He was the lawyer I had hired for the matter with James, so they accepted his presence. I headed to the meeting room, suppressing my confusion and agitation. Despite my turmoil and anxiety about the unknown situation ahead, I was somewhat relieved by the manager's calm handling and resolved to move forward step by step. As I walked to the meeting room, my mother-in-law and James glared at me with anger. Despite their dire situation, they seemed displeased to see me enjoying my work. Their gaze and attitude made their feelings clear. Sitting in front of my in-laws, we exchanged glares, and then the manager entered the meeting room with someone else. "Sorry I'm late." "What? Why are you here?" The person the manager brought was James' brother, my brother-in-law. He stood there, glaring at the two with an angry expression. "There's nothing to say. You guys have really done something ridiculous." My brother-in-law was a former gang leader who used to rule this area in his youth. He now runs his own company, working in construction. His employees affectionately call him boss, and he detests dishonest behavior. After consulting with him about this incident, he was visibly angered. When I lost my place to live, he had taken care of me for several weeks in a women's dormitory. He was already aware of the house situation with my in-laws. Informed about the details, he immediately offered his help. Why didn't he know? When my in-laws told me to leave the house, they said they had sold it to their eldest son and his wife. I found out everything from Susan and confirmed it. "You didn't think you could do such a horrible thing to Michelle and get away with it, did you?" As soon as the name Susan was mentioned, James and his mother showed expressions of astonishment. Susan was his wife and the mastermind behind this incident. As the wife of the eldest son, she had always harbored hostility towards me for some reason. She had been a housewife, following my brother-in-law's wishes, up to this point. However, it wasn't my brother-in-law's instruction but her own will. Women were seen as the guardians of the home, and her parents had lived that way, so housekeeping was deemed natural for her. Based on such notions, she seemed to believe that women who went against this belief were not real women. However, when I appeared, how did she view me? My attitude of actively engaging in work for nearly 40 years might have been too dazzling for her. Moreover, Susan was not good at cooking. Even my brother-in-law and father-in-law had asked my mother-in-law to teach her, and I had heard about this from James. On the other hand, I could handle household chores normally. Furthermore, I managed housework better than Susan while juggling my job. She might have been envious of my ability to do everything. Every time Susan met me, she started making snide remarks. She accused me of neglecting household chores or leaving them to my husband, throwing various harsh words at me for decades. However, my brother-in-law always intervened. That might have been another source of dissatisfaction for Susan. My brother-in-law said it was fine for Susan to work, and he helped around the house. Her inaction in this situation was her own choice. It was unfair for her to take out her frustrations on others. When my brother-in-law warned Susan, she began targeting her discontent at me. Susan confessed that she orchestrated the entire plan to take over the house and make me buy it. She instigated you, Mom and Dad, to execute this scheme. You all probably thought you could get your own house and continue pretending to be senile, and I wouldn't be able to complain. Unable to contact my brother-in-law because of Susan, they had their ways to orchestrate the entire scheme. James had also accepted a reward for helping them in this affair, making them all conspirators. The only person who didn't know was my brother-in-law, who would have stopped such foolish actions had he been aware. This situation must have filled him with regret. So that's why everyone behaved so meekly whenever he visited. Whenever my brother-in-law came over, my parents-in-law didn't do anything. They probably understood what the outcome would be if he found out about the situation. The manager and colleagues present watched my in-laws with expressions of astonishment. So, how should we handle this? I have no intention of forgiving even a fraction of the insult I received, let alone the trouble caused to Michelle. But it was Susan's suggestion. That's right. We were just misled by clever words. It wasn't intentional. Not intentional. You say? At James's statement, my patience reached its limit. I stood up, my face filled with anger, and yelled at my mother-in-law and James. How can you say you had no ill intentions after doing such a thing? Do you have any idea how much pain I've been through these 13 years? My suppressed emotions exploded, and I couldn't hold back my tears of anger and frustration. My mother-in-law and James had never seen me cry before. No matter the hardship, I had endured and persevered. Even when my father-in-law was falsely considered senile and acted freely, I never showed any tears and endured everything. In their eyes, I was always a strong woman who never cried. Seeing me raise my voice and cry then must have been shocking for them. Do you realize how grateful I was to you? How much I wanted to repay you? To think that the care for my father was motivated by such ulterior motives. I can forgive you. I will never forgive you. With those words as a signal, my brother-in-law brought someone into the meeting room, and a man in a black suit entered. He sat opposite us and looked intently at my in-laws. You will have to take responsibility for this. What? Faced with an incomprehensible turn of events, my mother-in-law exclaimed in surprise. This man is my lawyer, hired by brother-in-law. He is a respected attorney in our office, like a mentor to me. We intend to seek compensation for the unfair treatment I've received. What do you mean? It's pointless to dig up the past now. The past is irrelevant now. The lawyer, who had been quietly listening to my in-laws, slightly adjusted his glasses and coolly refuted them. The current evidence and the basis for the future claim of damages make the lawsuit fully feasible, especially since there was no agreement not to claim property at the time of the divorce. In this case, there is no specific time limit for claiming compensation. Furthermore, as he spoke, the lawyer took out an SSD from his pocket, and my in-laws looked confused. What is that? This is the record Michelle has been keeping. Her PC was equipped with a camera for remote meetings, and all your heinous acts have been saved as data. Upon learning this truth, my in-laws' expressions rapidly paled. Michelle mostly worked in the living room, didn't she? Modern laptops often have built-in cameras, and your harassment in the living room has backfired, the lawyer said before pocketing the SSD and calmly staring at my in-laws. The ownership of the house is already in Michelle's name, and your eviction is just a matter of time. We will proceed with legal action promptly, so please prepare the funds. Wait, you're saying it's changed to her name? James reflexively reacted to the liar's statement. My brother-in-law raised his voice in response to James's reaction. I asked Michelle to change the ownership to her name. Thanks to you putting it in Susan's name without permission, the change was surprisingly easy. Anything to say about that? My brother-in-law taunted James with a mischievous smile. James, who had never won a fight against his brother since childhood, couldn't argue back, and my mother-in-law also remained silent. I will also properly bill you for all the expenses involved in that transfer. That's only fair, right? After all, it was your wrongful actions. If you don't deal with what you've started, we'll be in trouble too, said my brother-in-law, folding his arms and standing imposingly, throwing those stern words at them. The two were speechless before my brother-in-law's stern demeanor. My brother-in-law had also informed Susan, his wife and the mastermind behind this ordeal, about this. After resolving this matter, he had expressed his intention to divorce her over the phone. I'm really sorry for involving you in this, Michelle. Even though I didn't know, I will support you to the fullest until you are satisfied. Let me know any request you have. It's my family who did this, so I have a responsibility too. If it hadn't been for my brother-in-law's call that day, I might still be suffering. If my brother-in-law hadn't been part of the family and there for me, maybe I wouldn't have been able to recover. I never realized how important it is to have support. Grateful for my brother-in-law's kindness and warmth, I glared at the two and threw decisive words at them. I will never forgive you for using my and my father's feelings and exploiting them for your own benefit. No matter how much you try to compensate, I will not forgive you. If you ever step foot in my office again, I will call the police. From now on, I will leave all responses to my representative. Never appear in front of me again. The manager and my colleagues listened as witnesses until the end, so my in-laws couldn't escape the truth and left the office dejectedly. Soon after, James and his family left the house. The negotiation for compensation was settled by my brother-in-law for $70,000, considering the purchase of the house, the motive behind the marriage, and the mental and physical pain I endured. I really wanted to get more, but after consulting with the lawyer, we concluded that this amount was fair, my brother-in-law said apologetically, and I nodded in gratitude. Considering that the maximum amount for moral harassment is usually around $30,000, this was a significant achievement. For me, it was nothing but gratitude. Fortunately, the house was returned to my possession within a few days. The furniture and appliances were also moved under my brother-in-law's supervision, and everything was successfully recovered. Currently, the house is being used as a rental property. It's too big for me, and since it has good location and barrier-free features, it seemed a waste not to use it. Following my brother-in-law's advice, I started renting it out. Susan is busy with her days working to pay off the debt, following my brother-in-law's decision. She works from morning till night, and my mother-in-law and James are in a similar situation. My father-in-law, unable to work due to his disability, contributes from his pension towards the debt repayment, and they seem to be leading a difficult life. I felt relieved that my brother-in-law is a trustworthy person. Years have passed since then, and I continue my work as a lawyer. Thanks to my brother-in-law, the monthly payments are going smoothly, and it's expected to be paid off by next year. Despite often contemplating ending my life amidst the hardships, I held on to the belief that my efforts would be rewarded someday. That belief has become reality, and I live each day with gratitude.